This beautiful woman is the most famous woman in South Korea. Wherever she goes, she never lacks the flashing lights of the media. Whenever she wears a piece of clothing, after the company's promotion, it sells out in an instant. But this woman named Heju is not some super celebrity. Rather, she is the second daughter of the C group Chaebol. However, Heju, who possesses both wealth and beauty, also has her own worries. Recently, the sales of C group's products have been declining sharply. Heju immediately summoned the heads of all departments, demanding that they follow her instructions to carry out promotional hype at the king's birthday banquet. The 21st century, South Korea has adopted a constitutional monarchy. The king still exists, though he no longer holds real power, but he remains a symbol of the nation and its class system. Although she is the illegitimate daughter of a wealthy Chaebol, Heju is, in terms of status, merely a commoner, inferior to the nobility. It so happens that today is the king's birthday. To rescue sales, Heju has decided to use herself as an advertisement for promotion. But the palace is a place where rank is strictly observed, with a rigid hierarchical order. Those who come and go here are mostly members of the royal family, people of high status, noble or distinguished. At the banquet, a noblewoman mocks Heju, saying she is nothing but a lowly commoner, an illegitimate daughter who was only brought to the chairman's side at age 10. Someone like that must be shameless and utterly lacking in manners. But Heju is not one to be bullied. She smashes a glass in front of the noblewoman, flashing a defiant and contemptuous smile. Her older half-brother also comes to mock her. Heju is still full of fighting spirit, retorting that her brother is like a cheap and stupid lapdog. The king's birthday ceremony is about to begin. Everyone moves into the main hall, but a long while passes, and the ceremony still hasn't started. Everyone waits with bated breath in silence. Heju knows they are all waiting for Grand Prince Rian. Since the king is still young, Grand Prince Rian, the late king's second son, is effectively the regent, the true center of power in the royal family. Finally, amid everyone's eager anticipation, Grand Prince Rian appears, but he disregards protocol, not wearing formal attire. Instead, he is dressed in hunting clothes. Compared to the elegant and dignified ceremony, he appears utterly unruly, his edge fully exposed. As the king writes his wishes, the ceremony proceeds to the tour segment. Heju wanders around the palace, trying to find a cell signal, when she happens to run into Grand Prince Rian. With an imposing calm, he demands that the woman before him state her name. Heju gives her name. Grand Prince Rian scolds her for loitering in a restricted area, and orders her to leave. But as he speaks, a loud explosion suddenly comes from a nearby palace. Grand Prince Rian rushes to check, only to see the palace engulfed in flames. The Grand Queen Dowager, without asking any questions, slaps Grand Prince Rian across the face, accusing him of trying once again to take the new king's life, as he did before. Fortunately, the king is unharmed. But because of this commotion, the ceremony ends early. Heju returns, disgruntled. Noticing her displeased expression, her secretary asks if she dislikes Grand Prince Rian. In the past, Heju and Grand Prince Rian attended the same middle school. At the secretary's words, Heju's memories are pulled back to many years ago. That night at school, Heju snuck into the archery range to practice for an upcoming shooting competition. But halfway through her practice, Grand Prince Rian appeared. With an aristocratic tone, he accused Heju of violating school rules and said she would have to lose the corresponding credit points. But Heju's eyes were full of defiance. She asked Grand Prince Rian in return if he would also have points deducted for being at the archery range. When he flashed a clear permit, Heju remained unconvinced. She pulled out the archery range key she had stolen from a classmate. She didn't understand why some people could shamelessly possess a key, why Grand Prince Rian could so easily obtain permission. With determined eyes, Heju declared she would not accept the threat of point deduction. Inside the palace, Grand Prince Rian is troubled by marriage. That day, the Grand Queen Dowager comes to see him, openly expressing her dissatisfaction. The palace caught fire, the king nearly fell into danger, yet the only thing the entire nation cares about is a minor wound on Grand Prince Rian's face, because he is the regent. From political leaders to business tycoons, even common citizens, everyone scrambles to claim a spot by his side. Grand Prince Rian's light shines too brightly, already overshadowing the king. To stabilize the king's position and remove this thorn in the side that is Grand Prince Rian, the Grand Queen Dowager demands that he marry the woman she has chosen. Once married, Grand Prince Rian must leave the palace and naturally will no longer be able to continue as regent. As the Grand Queen Dowager issues her ultimatum, a layer of sorrow settles over Grand Prince Rian's eyes. As a child, he followed his father's teachings, studying diligently. But even when he scored a perfect grade, because he was the second son, his father never once looked at him any differently. To remind him to stay in his place and not become an obstacle to the crown prince, his father even changed his title twice. Outside the palace, Heju is also troubled by marriage. Her father, the chairman, intends to arrange a marriage for Heju, but she hears that the prospective husband is just the representative of a small subsidiary, a nobody who can't even crack the industry rankings. Heju expresses strong dissatisfaction. She is not a naive romantic. She is willing to accept a strategic business marriage, but it must be a union of equals to be worthwhile. Her sister-in-law advises Heju not to be too picky, but Heju retorts sharply, suggesting that her sister-in-law probably married her good-for-nothing brother because of her own pickiness. Facing her brother, Heju's gaze is sharp. If not for being born of the legitimate wife, what aspect of her brother could possibly match her? In front of her father, Heju flatly declares that she will never marry an incompetent husband. The secretary compiles a list of candidate husbands for Heju, but Heju is still unsatisfied after reviewing it. Though the list contains company representatives, those companies have low rankings, and the candidates are ugly. She sees no profit for herself. Heju can't help sighing. She just wants a man whose ability, wealth, and looks match her own. Why is it so hard? Recently, due to his attire at the king's birthday ceremony, Grand Prince Rian has once again become the center of public opinion. The royal relatives criticize him for disrespecting tradition, while ordinary citizens are fascinated by the handsome Grand Prince. Heju also takes note of this Grand Prince Rian. When she thinks about it, it seems that across the entire nation, only Grand Prince Rian matches her in every way. Suddenly, Heju gets an idea to make Grand Prince Rian her future husband. Once she makes up her mind, Heju acts immediately. She applies for an audience with Grand Prince Rian, but her application is rejected. Still, Heju is confident, believing that Grand Prince Rian is playing hard to get. So she sends another application. The aide informs Grand Prince Rian that Heju used different names on her two applications. The first application used the name Heju, the second used the second child of Chairman Seong. Hearing this, Grand Prince Rian coldly rejects it again. Heju begins to wonder if it's because she didn't state a reason for the application. So this time, Heju boldly writes down the reason. She promises that this audience will promote national development. She signs it with her title and full name, but the application is still rejected. Again and again, each application fails. Heju roars in frustration, but after calming down, she suddenly recalls that day at the palace, when Grand Prince Rian called her Junior Hobei. Thinking of this, Heju changes her signature to Junior, earnestly asking her Senior to serve as her respected advisor. To her surprise, this application is accepted. Overjoyed, Heju dresses up carefully one evening soon after, and goes to the palace to meet Grand Prince Rian. "Why did you want to see me so badly?" Facing the high and mighty royal, Heju speaks bluntly, "I want to propose. Let's get married." A beautiful businesswoman launches an ardent pursuit of a regent prince. Wherever he goes, she follows. To shake the man's heart, she casts aside her pride, confessing her love boldly time and again, taking decisive action. When Heju proactively proposes marriage, Li Wan, the Prince of Rian, snaps open his folding fan, studies her gaze through the slats, then lifts her chin with the fan's end, asking her to name her terms for marriage. Heju answers bluntly. She comes from a prestigious family, is sharp and capable, beautiful and charming, and thick-skinned to boot. If their marriage draws criticism, she alone will bear the full brunt of the gossip. But none of these answers satisfy Li Wan. After a moment's thought, he rejects her outright. What he values is neither wealth, nor looks, nor ability, but love. Marrying the woman he loves is his lifelong dream. Yet Heju is not one to give up easily. Birds of a feather flock together, she reasons. She is certain that Li Wan, being an outlier, will be drawn to someone like her, his kindred spirit. To pursue Li Wan, Heju summons the head of her group's PR team. At her command, the team leader immediately mobilizes their media connections, finally uncovering Li Wan's unofficial schedule. Armed with this vital information, Heju springs into action. Wherever Li Wan appears, she appears too. From the racetrack to private dining rooms, every time, she throws him flirtatious glances, teases with words, vowing to wage an earth-shaking campaign for the Prince of Rian's heart. Li Wan tries to avoid her, but finds no place to hide. From cinemas to streets, indoors to outdoors, there is nowhere Heju cannot find him. Worried that she might pop up from somewhere again, Li Wan begins to demand perfection of himself. Every time he goes out, he frets that his clothes aren't nice enough. Heju's sister-in-law calls her, reminding her that today is her arranged blind date. If she stands the man up, Heju's father will shut down the cosmetics company she runs. Helpless, Heju reluctantly goes. The blind date, Mr. Kim, is not bad-looking. Tall, seemingly a gentleman in his words and deeds. But Heju is completely unimpressed. She cuts to the chase, asking when he plans to hold the wedding, whether he is the only son, and so on. Since it's a strategic marriage of convenience, she doesn't want to waste precious time. She promises that if they marry, she will provide him with immense wealth. In exchange, Mr. Kim must help her defeat her older brother and seize the group's chairmanship. The outcome is just as Heju expected. Mr. Kim is scared off by her ambition and calls off the blind date himself. Learning from Secretary Choi that Heju went on a blind date with another man, Li Wan grows restless. Then the secretary mentions a funny anecdote from Heju's school days, how she loved to argue. Li Wan's expression softens into a delighted smile. Secretary Choi is certain that if class were not a factor, even the Queen Dowager would be no match for Heju. At this, Li Wan's face darkens with displeasure, as if he does not want Heju entangled in court struggles. The Deep Palace is a bottomless, pitch-black vortex. It haunts Li Wan with frequent nightmares. Once upon a time, the late king passed away. The late king was Li Wan's elder brother, who had insisted on abdicating for certain reasons, but the Queen Dowager would not allow it. That night, the Queen Dowager burned the abdication decree. Then the palace caught fire, and the king was consumed by the flames. After his brother was gone, Li Wan had to hold back his tears, bury his grief, because he knew that from then on, he must shoulder heavy responsibilities, bear misunderstandings, and assist the young heir to the throne, steadying the nation's foundations. Today, the young king is to present the honorary flower to award-winning companies. That morning, the Queen Dowager instructs him sternly, behave properly, and do not rely on his uncle, the Prince of Rian. But before the ceremony, the young king calls Li Wan. Frightened by the upcoming event, Li Wan immediately comes to his side, dismisses the secretaries and security, takes the king's hand, and promises to stay with him. When the ceremony begins, all the camera flashes and lenses converge on the young king. He is deeply uneasy. At that moment, Li Wan steps forward, takes the king's hand again, and ascends the stage with him. Hee-ju is one of the attendees. Her attire today is quietly ladylike, yet still dazzling. At the ceremony, Hee-ju wins the Best Entrepreneur Award. On the podium, the young king places the honorary cap on Hee-ju's head. Li Wan hands her a bouquet. Seizing the opportunity, Hee-ju whispers, "I missed you." After the awards, Hee-ju takes a selfie wearing the cap and uploads it to social media, making sure to tag the Prince of Rian. If the post goes viral, the group's stock price is sure to soar. Seeing the news photo of Hee-ju wearing the honorary cap, Prime Minister Min Jung-woo beams with delight, hurriedly leaves work, and rushes to a restaurant to meet Hee-ju. Jung-woo comes from a political family. He is both a close friend of Prince Li Wan and a senior from Hee-ju's school days, a presence no less brilliant than the Prince of Rian. At the restaurant, Jung-woo treats Hee-ju to dinner. Seeing her proudly fiddling with the honorary cap, his eyes are filled with undisguised affection. He cannot forget that back in school, almost all the awards and honors went to Hee-ju, even the fiercely competitive archery competition. Before that contest, Hee-ju personally taught Jung-woo archery techniques, the stance for drawing the bow. But perhaps he never knew that Jung-woo had long harbored romantic feelings for her. Meanwhile, Li Wan suddenly falls ill, but refuses to go to the hospital, not wanting to cause a stir. He only summons a few doctors for a private consultation. Hee-ju, staying at the same hotel, learns of this. Understanding Li Wan's predicament, she privately asks the doctors to say that she is the one who is sick. Also worried about Li Wan, she suggests to Secretary Choi that the prince move back to the palace, since the royal physicians are there. Secretary Choi replies that the prince hates attracting attention. If he returns to the palace in such a condition, the whole court would be in an uproar, and all sorts of rumors would spread outside. As he speaks, Secretary Choi receives word that the Queen Dowager has arrived at the hotel. He hurriedly tells Hee-ju to hide, that she must not be discovered by the Queen Dowager. To protect Hee-ju, Li Wan deliberately strips to the waist, revealing his sculpted, well-defined abs, and asks the Queen Dowager to wait a moment. Flustered, the Queen Dowager turns to leave, but spots a woman's handbag left on the sofa. Sure enough, when she returns, Hee-ju is there in Li Wan's room. The Queen Dowager immediately speaks sharply, warning the Prince of Rian that he will be held accountable for today's misdeed. The next day, Hee-ju is still sleeping in at the hotel, but the scandal between her and Li Wan has already spread across the nation. The media wildly spins the narrative, calling Hee-ju the prince's secret lover, suspecting a secret hotel rendezvous. Reporters even captured doctors entering and leaving the hotel, and go so far as to speculate that Hee-ju is pregnant. The media frenzy is at its peak, yet Hee-ju remains unruffled. Her secretary reminds her that this is serious. In the past, when Hee-ju dated a boy band leader, fans threw eggs at her and scratched her car. But the Prince of Rian is on a whole different level from an idol. The entire nation are his fans. If the uproar grows, people of all ages and genders might do who knows what to Hee-ju. At this critical juncture, Secretary Choi urges Li Wan to return to the palace immediately to discuss countermeasures. But Li Wan insists on going to his private residence and orders that Hee-ju be brought there. Hee-ju comes as commanded. Li Wan apologizes to her, believing that he has dragged her into the storm and made her a target. As compensation, he tells her to name whatever she wants. Hee-ju opens a red cloth, revealing a withered honorary flower inside. Years ago, on the school campus, after an archery competition, she had beaten Li Wan and won this very prize. As she recalls the past, Hee-ju explains her situation. Her older brother is a complete fool with no brains, yet her father has still named him the group's successor. Why? Simply because her brother married a daughter of the Yungbon aristocracy, possessing the status that Hee-ju lacks, so she is fighting with all her might to climb higher, vowing to obtain the status that has always been beyond her reach. Looking into her resolute eyes, Li Wan slowly gives his answer. Then, prepare yourself to become the grand lady of the prince. Hee-ju's relentless pursuit finally pays off. At last, Li Wan agrees to marry her, but this unequal marriage must win public approval. When it comes to winning hearts, Hee-ju is an old hand. She deliberately appears hand in hand with Li Wan in front of the cameras, putting on a sweet display. Then she uses the group's PR power, to rapidly spread rumors of their romance. For a time, capturing Prince Lee Wan's heart becomes a trending keyword. Heeju's makeup also becomes the focus of nationwide adoration. Under the dazzling flashbulbs, Lee Wan leads Heeju into the palace. The Grand Princess Dowager wants to see Lee Wan. Before leaving, Lee Wan gently tucks a strand of Heeju's hair behind her ear. Heeju behaves demurely, playing along with Lee Wan's act, assuming a tender and agreeable pose. The Grand Princess Dowager questions Lee Wan about his relationship with Heeju. Lee Wan, fully aware of the Dowager's fears that he might seize power, states bluntly that he does not intend to deny his romantic relationship with Heeju and says there will be no premarital pregnancy to worry the Dowager. Learning that the Grand Princess Dowager has rejected their marriage request, Heeju is not overly discouraged. Instead, she playfully presses Lee Wan, asking if, in the future, should she clash with the Dowager, whether Lee Wan would side with her. Lee Wan curls a smile and answers, "I will stand by your side." As he speaks, Lee Wan's body keeps moving closer to Heeju, a hint of unreadable mockery in his eyes. The court ladies want to find another room for Heeju, but Lee Wan refuses, insisting she stay in his room. Heeju decides to let loose, and without further ado, sleeps in the same bed as Lee Wan. The reason is that Lee Wan's bed is unprecedentedly comfortable, but as soon as they start sleeping, they quarrel over the warm blanket. The court ladies eavesdrop and giggle, thinking the prince and Heeju are engaged in very intense, amorous activities. To create the impression that she stayed out all night, when returning to the company the next day, Heeju deliberately does not change her clothes. The public opinion unfolds, just as Heeju expected. All the trending keywords are about her. Heeju's identical outfits sell out completely. At this time, Prime Minister Jung-woo comes to see Heeju. Jung-woo's expression is stern, asking Heeju if she truly wants to marry Lee Wan. Heeju has no idea what Jung-woo is thinking, and lies, claiming she is deeply in love with Lee Wan, and begs Jung-woo to use his authority as Prime Minister to approve the marriage. Jung-woo's brow furrows deeply, his heart full of reluctance. Later that evening, Jung-woo goes to church to pray, but he reveals to the priest that he is not praying for happiness for his soon-to-be-married friend, but just the opposite. In fact, as far back as their school days, Heeju had already entered Jung-woo's heart. That day, Heeju was in the classroom stealing the key to the archery field from a classmate. Jung-woo secretly distracted the teacher for her. At that moment, watching Heeju skip and hop merrily out of the classroom, Jung-woo's eyes were filled with unspeakable tenderness. Inside the palace, to avoid issuing a statement regarding the marriage of Prince Lee Wan, it is said the Grand Princess Dowager is feigning illness. Heeju calls, fuming. All the rumors about their romance have been completely taken down. Clearly, the Dowager is behind it again. While Heeju is on the phone, a few schoolgirls suddenly throw eggs at her, shouting that she's a vixen seducing the prince. But Heeju is not one to be trifled with. She yells at the girls, calling them snotty-nosed brats, and declares that she has important business today, otherwise she wouldn't let them off lightly. After chasing the girls away, Heeju sees her father, the chairman, coming to see her after a long absence. Her father asks harshly if Heeju remembers that in a few days it will be his first wife's, her brother's mother's birthday. Years ago, after being abandoned by her mother, young Heeju found her father by herself. At that time, upon learning that her husband had an illegitimate daughter, his wife was so shocked she fell ill and never recovered. To her father, Heeju's appearance was the beginning of his family's misfortune. Growing up, Heeju kept achieving outstanding results and used them to demand from her father the same benefits as her brother. From a bicycle at first to a house later, and finally demanding that her father revise his will. To her father, Heeju became increasingly greedy. So now, her father declares that he would rather cut ties than hand over the group to Heeju. Heeju replies with a cold laugh, even calling her father by his name. She doesn't mind at all going to war with him. After breaking with her father, Heeju receives a call from Lee Wan. Lee Wan is worried about her, but Heeju deliberately hides her emotions, hurriedly hanging up, unwilling to let anyone see the true turmoil inside her. In truth, Heeju longs so much for her father's affection and envies her brother so. She once thought her excellence could soothe her father's sorrow and earn his love. Just as she is feeling sad, a sudden urgent knock sounds at the door. Heeju instinctively picks up a baseball bat and goes to the door. But when she looks up, it's Lee Wan. Lee Wan has brought her a hot sandwich. He went to the store himself to buy it. Specifically, the hot-selling Seduce the Prince Heeju Tatsan set meal. Faced with Lee Wan's sudden little romantic gesture, Heeju's previously downcast face finally breaks into a smile. Learning that Heeju was hit with eggs earlier, to protect her, Lee Wan takes her to his private residence that night. Heeju cooperates fully, clinging tightly to Lee Wan in front of the maids, acting like a little girl attached to her prince. After moving into the private residence, Heeju asks the question that's been on her mind. Why did Lee Wan agree to marry her? Lee Wan's answer seems very sincere. Heeju is beautiful and rich, and most importantly, if he ascends the throne one day, Heeju will be the only one who understands him. Heeju is stunned. It seems Lee Wan's ambition is bursting forth. The Grand Princess Dowager has also made a move. Today, Director Jung of the Royal Protection Bureau suddenly visits, demanding that Hee-ju cooperate with an investigation, suspecting her of involvement in the palace fire a few days ago. Seeing Director Jung order a seizure and search, Hee-ju hurriedly contacts Lee Won, but Lee Won is at the Jongmyo shrine participating in the royal ancestral rites. Hee-ju instead contacts her secretary, first sending the secretary to the ritual site, then retrieving the hidden Prince Lee Won's token from the toilet tank, and having the butler take the token to meet the secretary. This token was personally given to Hee-ju by Lee Won, a talisman to summon him in times of crisis. The token proves useful. Just as the director is about to take Hee-ju to the palace, Lee Won arrives like a timely rain, reprimanding the director for acting without permission. At that moment, the Grand Princess Dowager appears, informing Lee Won that she ordered the director to act. The Dowager speaks convincingly, claiming that Hee-ju's actions in the palace on the day of the incident were all improper, and that these prove she is suspected of arson. But Lee Won is neither humble nor pushy, firmly shielding Hee-ju behind him, declaring that any circumstance where Hee-ju is suspected, he himself was also involved. If they want to investigate, he will cooperate to the end. Seeing the standoff between Prince Lee Won and the Dowager, the secretary quickly tries to defuse the situation, deliberately kicking Hee-ju. Lee Won resolutely catches the nearly fallen Hee-ju, his eyes sharp as he retorts to the Dowager, asking if she dares to investigate Hee-ju at his private residence. When carrying Hee-ju to the bed, Lee Won rolls his eyes and simply tosses her onto the mattress. He had already figured out that Hee-ju was fainting. Seeing her hiding her worry and anxiety, Lee Won calms her down. He is confident that, to keep the matter from blowing up, the Grand Princess Dowager cannot take action for now. Hee-ju feels a bit smug, remarking that indeed Lee Won chose to stand by her side. Just as Hee-ju predicted, the palace is full of gossiping tongues, and the news of Lee Won carrying her has already spread romantic rumors like wildfire inside the palace. After resolving the crisis, Hee-ju safely returns to Lee Won's private residence. To fan the flames of this romantic rumor, Hee-ju drives to the palace gates late at night, only to see Lee Won, a prince, climbing over the wall. Hee-ju stands on a small stool, leaning against the wall, and gives Lee Won the tea she drinks for insomnia, and all her vitamins. Looking at the adorable Hee-ju, who fancies herself a capable helpmeet, Lee Won can't help but cup Hee-ju's cheeks, and without a word, kisses this very special Hee-ju. Lee Won couldn't control himself. He turned the fake act into reality and kissed Hee-ju. While Hee-ju was stunned, Lee Won whispered, "Someone is secretly filming us." Hee-ju understood immediately. She deliberately pouted her lips, wanting to kiss again so the secret photographer could get a better angle. The next day, the news of their midnight rendezvous topped the hot search rankings. The court ladies were also gossiping. The royal family held an emergency meeting. Lee Won believed they should immediately issue a statement acknowledging the relationship. Some royal courtiers opposed, emphasizing that Hee-ju was merely a commoner and an illegitimate daughter. Prime Minister Jung-woo sided with Lee Won. Jung-woo also thought they should announce it to the world, but not as a joyful event, rather as a scandal. Furthermore, Prince Leon needed to clarify in the statement that they were only dating, not planning to marry. But at the same time, Jung-woo used a strategic retreat. He agreed to let Hee-ju continue living in the private residence, but demanded that Lee Won return to live in the palace. After weighing the options, the royal family ultimately issued a statement, acknowledging Prince Leon's relationship with Hee-ju and stating that the relationship was not a prelude to marriage. A royal spokesperson interpreted the statement, saying that the possibility of their marriage was very low, because the royal clan was extremely sensitive about bloodlines and could never accept a commoner. Looking at the newspaper with the paparazzi photo of her and Lee Won kissing, Hee-ju fumed, complaining that Lee Won hadn't kissed her again last night. She thought the angle of the photo made them look too much like elementary school kids playing kissy face. As a manipulator of public opinion, Hee-ju believed they should at least be photographed having a date at a restaurant, with a headline like, "Prince Leon to marry due to pregnancy." Those kinds of photos were sexy and shameless enough, and sounded most enticing. As she spoke, Hee-ju licked her lips. For a moment, Lee Won seemed bewitched. His Adam's apple rose and fell involuntarily. Hee-ju decided to strike while the iron was hot. "May I take you somewhere? Let's speed things up." Lee Won was aroused. Instinctively, he averted his gaze, losing control. Later, at the private residence, the butler helped Hee-ju with her hair and makeup. Privately, Lee Won compared Hee-ju to Princess Diana. He resolved to keep the romance in the spotlight together with Hee-ju, rather than giving in to the Grand Queen Dowager's wishes. A short while later, Hee-ju appeared before Lee Won in a dress with her hair pinned up. In that instant, Lee Won's gaze froze. His breath seemed to pause. But when Hee-ju came close, Lee Won deliberately said the outfit wasn't nice, calling her a princess disease type of lady. So Hee-ju changed into jeans and canvas shoes, appearing light and lively before Lee Won. Lee Won was stunned again, letting Hee-ju take his arm. In the car afterward, Hee-ju was busy fixing her hair, asking Lee Won to hold up a small mirror. Lee Won obediently held the mirror, letting Hee-ju fuss over her looks beside him. Their destination was a baseball game. Hee-ju changed into a team fan jersey, wanting Lee Won to wear a matching couple's outfit. Secretary Choi forbade it, saying that royal family members could not casually participate in sports or express opinions. the game had already started. Jung-woo was the star pitcher. Hee-ju cheered and shouted for Jung-woo. During a break, Jung-woo sat down next to Hee-ju. When Jung-woo arrived, Lee-won couldn't help showing displeasure. The big screen captured Lee-won and Hee-ju. The audience egged them on, asking them to kiss on the spot. Lee-won whispered in Hee-ju's ear, "Shall we speed things up?" Hee-ju tried to hide her blushing face and displayed a message in large letters on her phone in front of the camera. "Let's maintain etiquette." After the game, Jung-woo invited Hee-ju to lunch. Lee-won looked jealous and insisted on tagging along. Before leaving, he couldn't help hinting to Jung-woo, "Aren't you busy today, Jung-woo?" When the three sat down to eat, Lee-won kept delaying picking up his chopsticks. Only then did Hee-ju learn that as a royal, Lee-won could not eat out casually, nor could he eat raw food or street food to avoid food poisoning. Hee-ju couldn't help sighing, "Such a life is way too boring." Jung-woo took the chance to add, "That's exactly why Hee-ju shouldn't marry the prince." But as Jung-woo's words fell, Lee-won proactively picked up a piece of raw fish and brought it to Hee-ju's mouth, telling her to eat plenty now, before she married him. When she learned that Hee-ju had taken Prince Leon to a baseball field and a raw fish restaurant, Choi court lady at the private residence made a decision. She would personally take charge of disciplining Hee-ju to make Hee-ju learn the royal rules as soon as possible. Lee-won called Hee-ju to explain the situation. Hee-ju felt no pressure at all and agreed to attend Choi court lady's lessons properly. Today, Hee-ju returned to the group to handle work. Her secretary suddenly asked her how the prince's kissing skills were. Hee-ju was flustered and tried to explain. She was no underage girl. She wouldn't blush and flutter over a single kiss. The secretary revealed that it was said the prince had been a lifelong single. Before Hee-ju, the prince had never had any scandals. Hee-ju paused. If he truly had been a lifelong single, then Lee-won's kissing skills were quite good. At night, after finishing work, Hee-ju returned to the prince's private residence. Unexpectedly, Choi court lady suddenly appeared, wearing a stern face, ready to begin her discipline and restraint of Hee-ju. Hee-ju sat obediently in a chair. Choi court lady taught her not to say the same thing twice, not to drag out the end of her sentences. Those things seemed frivolous. Then Choi court lady made Hee-ju practice her standing posture, walking posture. Choi court lady thought her discipline was working, but little did she expect that after just a short while, Hee-ju successfully turned the tables, and instead started teaching Choi court lady Pilates poses. Just then, Lee-won arrived. Hee-ju bounced over and snuggled into Lee-won's arms, pressing close to him, unwilling to let go, while actually whispering for Lee-won to take Choi court lady away. Choi court lady reminded the prince to return to the palace before the gates closed, but Hee-ju clung to the prince playfully. Lee-won then gave an order. Choi court lady was to return to the palace with him. But the next day, Choi court lady came back to the private residence tirelessly, once again launching her royal education for Hee-ju. Today's lesson topic was royal funerals. Hee-ju learned that the last time the royal family held a public funeral was a very long time ago. The reason was that years earlier, the prince's mother, father, and older brother had all passed away in succession. Because the tragedies had been too frequent, the royal family had decided no longer to hold public funeral ceremonies. Hee-ju pretended to wipe tears and express sympathy, but took the opportunity to ask for a moment alone. In private, Hee-ju looked up past news articles and discovered that the prince's parents and brother had all died unnatural deaths. For a moment, Hee-ju frowned, realizing that Lee-won harbored unspoken unease deep in his heart. Thinking of this, Hee-ju called Lee-won, but no one answered, because at that very moment, Lee-won was talking with the Grand Queen Dowager. The Grand Queen Dowager introduced a noble lady of the aristocratic class to Lee-won, falsely claiming that she was unwell, and asked Lee-won to accompany this woman to an event and dinner the next day. Lee-won was sharp and direct, asking the attendants what exactly the Grand Queen Dowager's illness was. When they stammered, Lee-won seized the moment to make a demand. Royal physicians must observe the Grand Queen Dowager's condition daily, and the Grand Queen Dowager was forbidden from receiving guests. Privately, Lee-won ordered Secretary Choi to investigate that woman. He needed to know his enemy. After finishing official matters, Lee-won returned Hee-ju's call. Hee-ju hinted to Lee-won that she was on his side. Spouses are one body. No matter what kind of success you want to achieve, I will support you firmly. Lee-won smiled softly upon hearing this. In all these years, Hee-ju was the first to encourage him to face his ambitions head-on. At that thought, Lee-won ignored Jung-woo's demands and decided to return to the private residence that evening to see Hee-ju. Inside the residence, Choi court lady was still disciplining Hee-ju, making her balance porcelain on her head while practicing walking. Hee-ju managed a forced smile and walked carefully until the young king played hooky and came to visit the prince. Hee-ju used the opportunity to end class early, dragged Jung-woo along, and played and frolicked with the young king. The young king, caught up in the fun, wanted to ride in the red convertible parked in the courtyard. Given the king's tantrum, Hee-ju convinced the court lady to let her drive the king out, promising to keep the king safe. Jung-woo was worried and followed behind in his own car. But on the road, the king complained the car was too slow, so Hee-ju pressed the accelerator, speeding up a little. Then the brakes failed. The car sped up uncontrollably. In a life-or-death moment, Hee-ju wrestled with the steering wheel, trying to scrape against the guardrails to force the car to stop. In the darkness, a car suddenly appeared ahead, shoving hard against the runaway vehicle from behind, then deliberately swerving across the middle of the road. Hee-ju crashed into it. The two cars collided violently, and finally the runaway car came to a stop. Hee-ju, having escaped death, looked ahead and saw climbing out of the other car none other than Lee Won, who had risked injury for her. End of episode. Please like and leave a comment.